thank everyone for joining us today. I'm Chris Hamilton. I'm the founder of Hamilton Education. I've also founded several other educational companies that I created or co-created and sold. For the last 10 years, I've been running Hamilton Education. We do four things. We help students with specialized tutoring. We do test prep. Huffington Post says we're perhaps the best in the United States at test prep. We also help people apply to college, sometimes starting at a younger age, 8th, 9th, 10th. Sometimes we meet students who are going into senior year. We work with students in Dubai, in Brazil, in India, in China, in the East Coast. We work with students in Northern California. And we work, of course, with many students in Southern California, particularly in San Diego, where we're based. Today, I'm going to talk about something, and I'm going to try to be brief. 20, 30 minutes, I hope, should do it. I want to talk about a question that I get all the time. It's a question about scholarships, and I realized I should really just dig in and try to explain as well as I can why some of the questions about scholarships are assuming something about scholarships that doesn't really obtain, isn't really how scholarships work. So today I'm talking about secret scholarships, what almost no one tells you about merit scholarships. Almost everyone, especially the media, in my view, gets scholarships wrong. In most cases, you don't find scholarships or apply for them. There are some instances in which you do, but very educated, very sophisticated clients of mine who are very savvy in many, many ways, they often will end an initial meeting by asking, oh, also, can you help us find scholarships? And I want you to know, if you do the right things, the scholarships will find you. You earn them directly through colleges that accept you, either by being strong enough to get into a rich university, an Ivy Plus university. If you are strong enough to get into a Harvard, a Yale, a Princeton, a Stanford, they will look at need-based aid, which is the only aid they offer at that level, in a very generous light. They will look at a family making as much as $300,000 and assume that family needs help paying for college. And of course, they may be right, because in Southern California, you could make what would appear to be a lot of money in Ohio or Kentucky and still wonder how you're going to pay your bills the next month. Most of my students, although we're proud that we have double digits getting into Ivy Leagues this year and every year, most of my students are not going to get into Harvard and Stanford. They will get scholarships through something called merit. Merit scholarships are the focus of our conversation tonight. This is a headline I found. Take a look at this. I'm going to put on my do not disturb button. This is a headline that tells us that a Louisiana teenager breaks some kind of a record. I didn't know anyone was keeping track. He's earned more than $9 million in scholarship offers. Now, that does not mean that this kid has $9 million in the bank. If you look below the headline, you can see that he applied to 170 schools. That's a lot. Some people think I am a bit crazy for recommending that students apply to 15 or 20 universities, maybe more in some cases. I have never had anyone apply to 170. So if you average the amount of aid this student received, the amount of scholarships, it's about $50,000 per school. In the story, it says one of the most impressive aspects of this record is that there are no third-party scholarships. Rather, the offers all came directly from the schools. With all respect to the media and reporters, That's not quite right. That is not the most impressive aspect. That is what we would expect. Almost all of the money that you would be offered in a scholarship will come from the university, will come from the institution. The amounts of money that come from independent scholarships, from outside scholarships, is very small in most cases. It's very rare that that money is significant. Here's another headline: millions in scholarship and grant money unclaimed, how to minimize student debt. These millions that news stories are talking about are almost always the accumulation of $500, $300, $1,000 private non-renewable scholarships. Indeed, you do have to apply for these. You usually have to write essays to get these scholarships, but they're probably not worth your time. And in a cruel twist of fate, they may count against you when you get actual money from a university. All of these sources of funding could, in fact, take away from a university's willingness to grant you aid for merit or need. So this money is often misunderstood. There are basically four types of scholarships. I'm going to try to walk you through them briefly. Athletic scholarships. These I find are often misunderstood. Small value, non-renewable scholarships. These are the scholarships that headline was referencing. Need-based scholarships. Scholarships that could come from the federal government, but mostly come from wealthy universities, from money that's in a pool set aside for students who they want to attend but cannot afford to pay full tuition, and then merit scholarships. And this is our focus tonight. Athletic scholarships. When you watch TV, you watch movies, you hear about a full ride to a Division I school. These scholarships are very rare. Most Division I coaches and teams have a pool of money, and they're going to try to divvy it out to as many players, as many athletes as possible. You have to be a very special athlete, a potential Heisman Trophy winner, to get a legitimate full ride D1 scholarship. They happen, but they happen to the people who you see on TV. They are not a common way of getting money for college. And if you stop playing, the scholarship disappears. Granted, this landscape is going to be changed profoundly because of the Dartmouth students' efforts at unionization. The NCAA is rethinking how student athletes relate to a college. When colleges began a program of paying athletes in college, which is happening before our eyes, you will see major changes in these types of scholarships. In my office, we tend to be interested in students who might use athletic skill to apply to Ivy Leagues and Division III colleges. Division III colleges are the smallest of the college athletic programs, and they include universities like MIT and Caltech and nearly every liberal arts college. Division III athletic programs and Ivy Leagues do not offer athletic scholarships. They offer something more valuable. Athletics will not get you money because of your playing a sport and being good at it. They will get you ahead of the line, ahead of other people who want that spot. I think most of you realize this is why those millionaires and celebrities went to jail back in the Varsity Blues scandal. They went to a unethical operator who, instead of helping them understand that you need to donate millions of dollars to get into these schools, they tried to bribe coaches to make their students look like they were recruitable athletes. They didn't want scholarship money. They wanted a spot ahead of others in the line. It's good that those people went to jail, in my opinion. Need-based scholarships are a very important part of the scholarship landscape. The federal government will offer some money, but it's very limited. It has a very low ceiling. And you need to fill out the FAFSA, the federal application for free student aid, if it's a public school you're applying to, and the CSS profile is often used to look at your means of paying for college for a private school. I'm not going to go into the details of the FAFSA and CSS profile, except to note the FAFSA has had a very rough time of late. They redesigned it to be more efficient, and of course, they basically broke it. So it's created a lot of uncertainty about how students will be paying for college. You should know that the FAFSA and CSS profile have slightly different pieces of information that they want about your financial health, but essentially, in most cases, your house and your retirement are not considered to be available for funding your student. So one sad commentary about the FAFSA and CSS profile is, if you have debt, if you've been living beyond your means, if you do not have significant savings, you might end up getting a lot of money for college. Many of my clients are 1.5 generation immigrant families that are pretty conservative fiscally. They want to make sure they have a nest egg, they have something to fall back on. Those savings will generally be considered up for grabs. So I'm happy to talk with anyone individually about these elements of financial aid, but there are ways of putting yourself in a better position to get money as a need-based form of aid, but you should probably talk to a reliable and ethical accountant. If you are doing things to get more need-based aid, like hiding income, putting assets in possession of a friend or other family member, you are breaking the law and breaking a vital trust with universities. All Ivies are need blind. That means if you think you're going to game the system by clicking a little box that says you don't want to be considered for aid, you won't be considered for aid. But for Ivies, they're not considering your ability to pay. They are truly need blind for domestic applicants. If you're international, it's not quite the same. Asking for aid doesn't affect your chances of getting in for Ivies. There are some other schools where it may affect your chances of getting in. For middle-class families attending an expensive university like an Ivy League, it could actually be cheaper than attending an in-state public university, because Princeton, Harvard, Yale have a vast sum of money to offer for need-based aid. I have had families who a student got into Princeton, the dad's an engineer, the mom's a teacher, they make a very good living, they are not wealthy, but they are definitely not poor. Even in San Diego, they're not poor, they're comfortable. Princeton is very expensive, Berkeley is cheaper. But when we factor in the need-based aid that Princeton offers, in some cases, Princeton will be cheaper for families unless they make a great deal of money. The trick, of course, is to get into Princeton, Harvard, Stanford, Yale. Merit scholarships are probably the biggest secret about scholarships. And the secret is there really isn't a secret. The most generous sources of funding for middle-class families are through the traditional notions of merit. In other words, there are hundreds of colleges, even many in the very top tier, that will offer money, grants, not loans. You don't have to pay it back. It is free money. They will offer money for students who have grades, scores, impact, and insight that truly make them stand out. The greatest secret about scholarships is your student being an amazing student, an amazing person, doing amazing things, can earn, in our offices, on average between $100,000 and $300,000 from many top tier colleges. There are basically two types of these merit scholarships. Scholarships given to you because you are better in some perceivable way to the typical student who attends this university or college. There are external and internal merit-based scholarships. The external merit-based scholarships are scholarships awarded based on GPA, scores, almost always both of these are important. Impact, that means did you build, found, create, lead, and insight. When you told your story in a series, often of essays, not to colleges, but to an external source of funding, Did they think, wow, you are amazing? Do we help students apply to these external merit-based scholarships? Yes, we do. In some cases, our help is tremendously significant. In other cases, students do it largely on their own. What am I talking about when I talk about external merit-based scholarships? Coca-Cola Scholars, Rise Scholar Program created, of course, by Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO, Davidson Fellows Scholarship. Many of our students will earn $25,000 in free money for college, although we'll talk about something more valuable in earning a Davidson scholarship. Cameron Impact Scholars and Jack Kent Cooke Scholars. These are just some of the external scholarships that are available and are heavily driven by merit. Some are also driven by need as well as merit, but merit in these external scholarships is always the primary focus. If you become a Jack Kent Cooke scholar, the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation will pay for just about everything, including, in some instances, your graduate school. It's a pretty extraordinary thing. They may even pay for you to attend a boarding school like Phillips Exeter Academy. In fact, I've had a student where that was the case. Here's the Eric Schmidt Rise program. Now, as always, there's a bit of a catch. It says a 4-year post-secondary education scholarship, including tuition and a living stipend. Wow. Based on need and where not already covered by financial aid. For many middle-class families, getting a Rise scholarship or a Davidson, you may make too much money for these external sources of scholarship and funding to actually award you any cash. Here's the catch, though. They're so extraordinarily prestigious, so extraordinarily respected, and so rare that earning one of these awards may be a significant factor in getting into a top Ivy Plus school. And if you get into a top Ivy Plus school, they will factor need-based scholarship awards very generously. Again, they may turn a family that will get not a penny from the UCs into a family that gets $200,000 worth of financial aid to an Ivy League school. So these Rise scholarships are tremendously desirable. They're also, statistically speaking, very rare. You might get the impression that they're not as rare as they are because I just went on the website just yesterday and I found, okay, here's Andrew Gao. He's a former CCA student in the midst of some people from Brazil, Ukraine, Cambodia. This is Renee Wong. She graduated Bishops this year. This is a public site. I'm not outing her or embarrassing her. She's a genius. She created a modular homeless solution. She also won a Davidson scholarship as well as the Rise scholarship, and both websites feature her. She's in pretty good company. Kids all over the world who are inventing and creating things. When I say impact, that's internal merit scholarships are different. These are more common, and you do not have to have changed the world to get an internal merit scholarship. And to be fair, I'm kind of conjuring up this language. Perhaps other people use external, internal. To me, these words make sense because external sources of merit scholarships come from institutions, organizations, nonprofits outside of a university or college. Internal merit scholarships are money that you get because you're amazing in some regard, and it comes from inside the university or college. This is where most middle-class families will find in our office anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 in scholarships per university. Some will offer none, but many in the top tier will offer merit scholarships in this range. And the good news is They use traditional notions of merit rather than aspects of identity or under or overrepresented status, which can be challenging for students who are middle class and who are Asian American. They're not underrepresented, they're overrepresented. These scholarships tend to go to extraordinary students who've done extraordinary things, and that makes them extraordinarily useful. Most internal merit scholarships have a purpose. There's a certain kind of generosity at work in a university offering them, but there's a pragmatism as well. They are being offered to families to pull or steal away a student who likely has an offer from a slightly better or higher ranked institution. So if we look at the US News top tier, Princeton, MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, in that category, I'm not aware of any merit scholarships that are offered whatsoever. Getting in is the merit scholarship. They are very generous with need base. But if we go down the list just a little bit to Duke, to Columbia even. Columbia has what is essentially a merit scholarship, but they will never use that word because Columbia is Columbia. They do not want to be seen as paying students to come to Columbia, but where Columbia is lacking in engineering and CS and STEM students, they offer a special scholarship that they call a research grant, but it is a merit-based scholarship. Duke offers an extraordinary merit-based scholarship. And as we get further down this list, not very far, Vanderbilt is a dreamy school. Certainly many dream of it, and it is a very, very highly regarded university, opening many doors to many careers. Vanderbilt will give 100% funding. The catch is, who will get 100% merit scholarship for Vanderbilt? Someone who looks to the Vanderbilt admissions like they might have gotten into Harvard or Stanford. So the four things that can get you these incredibly valuable scholarships are GPA, great scores. You should know, I've never seen anyone offered these who didn't send in scores. They absolutely want SAT, ACT scores. Impact, which is, did you make, build, found, create? Did you do something that helps other people? And also insight. Are your application essays telling us something about how you see the world that makes nearly everyone who reads them want to meet you? They have to offer a perspective that feels, we almost might say, profound, some kind of deep reflection. These four things, every single one of them, are necessary to get what we call a named award. These scholarships almost always come not just with money, but with a name. And so if we are ever in a meeting talking and I use this expression, named scholarship, I mean not just money, not just a grant, not just money you don't have to pay back, but a name, a scholarship name that will be on your curriculum vitae for decades. It will help you get into medical school. It will help you get into law school. It will tell people who are looking at your resume, even if you didn't go to an Ivy League school, that you probably were accepted to one. Here's an example. Columbia offers the Raby Scholars Program. It is typically $10,000 every year as a research grant. Who gets it? Students in STEM majors, particularly engineering. We have several examples of students who've earned this, considering that they give, I think, 10 a year. It's extraordinary that some years we'll have 2 of these. Duke, the AB Duke Scholarship Program. You have to be extraordinary to earn this. But if you want to go to Duke and you also got into an Ivy League or 2, this may be the sweetener that pulls you away from that Ivy League school. Certainly Duke is equal to many or most of the Ivy League schools. And Duke will offer a very generous, full funding merit scholarship. How do you get it? You look like someone who would get into schools that are just a tiny bit above Duke. Vanderbilt offers several merit-based scholarships. The one I'm most familiar with is the Cornelius Vanderbilt Scholarship. It is full funding, worth in excess of $300,000. In the last week or two, I've been working with a student applying to med school. She got into Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, and also got into Vanderbilt with the Cornelius Vanderbilt Scholarship. That's kind of what that looks like. I was not around their dinner table for the discussion of turning down a $300,000 scholarship from Vanderbilt to go to one of those three schools I mentioned, but it must have been an interesting conversation. This is a very, very valuable scholarship, which will instantly tell people Vanderbilt thought you were pretty amazing. USC is a little bit down the list, not much further down the list. I taught for years at UCLA. I have every joke about USC you can imagine. University of second choice, University of spoiled children. That was never really true. USC has always been a world-class university with a beautiful campus. And I have to admit, as a UCLA person, USC does beat UCLA at football frequently, although they're kind of like the Patriots. They also cheat. USC was not as high on the rankings as it is now, did not have a 9% acceptance rate. It had a 40, 50% acceptance rate in the 80s and 90s. How did they get to be almost bumping up against the Ivy level category? They needed more superstar, amazing students. How did they get them? They paid for them. If you have a PSAT score that makes you eligible for national merit semifinalist status, it's got to be a good PSAT score. That is the one element that triggers consideration for USC. In fact, if you get into USC at all and you're a national merit semifinalist, you will automatically get a presidential scholarship. It is half tuition. And if you are amazing in some other way, you could earn a trustee's scholarship at USC. This will be on your resume forever. This will be on your curriculum vitae. You will get invited to campus events. Dignitaries and CEOs will come to campus. They have to have lunch with students. You'll be on the list of people they have lunch with. I've had students turn down Yale to go to USC for a trustees, and the student I'm thinking of is now at an Ivy League medical school. You better believe if you're a trustee scholar, a dean at USC is going to be writing a letter of rec for you. They have invested a lot of money in you. They want to show a return. They want you to reach your goals and do something amazing. How do you get this? For the trustee, you've got to show some significant impact. You've got to make a strong impression. But the first vital step is a strong PSAT score. I'm perpetually baffled that so many high schools don't even mention the PSAT when, if you are from any variety of Spanish-speaking background, you could be a National Hispanic Recognition Scholar simply based on your 11th grade PSAT. And if your 11th grade PSAT is strong, that is what initiates a USC presidential or trustee merit-based scholarship. Again, the silence about this puzzles me. Liberal arts colleges, as many of you know, they're not liberal or conservative in the way we typically use the words today, and they don't teach art except for a handful of majors in art. Liberal arts colleges are essentially little Ivy League colleges. They are smaller. and small in the best sense. Small like a private jet is small, not small like a New York City apartment. Liberal arts colleges, the most common majors are the most common majors at Ivy League schools. In fact, often we call liberal arts colleges little Ivies. The most common majors are econ, bio, computer science, poli-sci, history. Liberal arts colleges often have significant financial endowments, significant money in the bank, and many of them in this snobby top tier will pay for your student to attend. I have seen, believe it or not, at Amherst, which is at the very tippy top of this top tier ranking, I've seen Amherst award merit scholarships. Who gets one? Someone who's deciding between Yale and Amherst. In the instance I'm thinking of, the student chose Yale, but could have been swayed by that amazing scholarship. When I see Bowdoin, I see Carleton. They offer merit scholarships. They also offer higher than a 90% acceptance rate to medical school for students with good grades and good scores. You should keep in mind, Berkeley and UCLA recently are below 50% acceptance rates for medical school. These are schools where many of your dreams could come true. What dreams? I had a student who went to Bowdoin. He went to Bowdoin through athletic recruitment, swimming. He wasn't fast enough to swim for Stanford. He didn't have the strength in the application to get into Stanford. He used athletics to get into Bowdoin. Where is he now? MD, PhD program at Stanford. Bowdoin may not impress your Southern California neighbors. Who does it impress? The admissions committee for the MD, PhD program at Stanford. And if we go a little bit down this list, if we get to Kenyon, which on this kind of blurry list is 39, Kenyon, 4 or 5 years ago, had about a 96% acceptance rate to med school. And Kenyon will give most of my students about $25,000 in a merit-based scholarship because Kenyon tends to draw heavily from Midwestern students. There aren't a lot of high schools like Westview, Del Norte, CCA in Ohio. And so being strong, but maybe not the strongest, might make you strong enough to get $100,000 from Kenyon. And Kenyon is a highly respected, nationally significant liberal arts college. DePauw at number 46 is near the bottom of the top tier, although keep in mind the current CEO of Ulta Beauty is a DePauw grad. DePauw produces a lot of people who end up doing significant work in Chicago and Wall Street. DePauw, the average amount of money that my students this year got from DePauw was $160,000 in merit aid, making it cheaper to go to DePauw than to attend any UC. And some of my students who looked a little more amazing, but not amazing enough to get into the UCs. Not that the UCs are necessarily thinking about some of the same terms. Some of my students got 100% scholarship to DePauw. Merit aid is a reminder that many colleges are aware that strong grades and scores together, according to every study, are powerfully predictive of who's going to do fantastically well, even at a demanding, academically rigorous campus. Kenyon, this is a description of their honor and science scholarships. These are automatically renewable unless you're getting bad grades. That's $100,000. DePauw offers a named scholarship, the Rector Scholar Award. The typical amount is $40,000 a year. Again, it's a grant. It doesn't have to be paid back. If you go below the top tier for US News, about 75% of accepted students may earn some kind of merit. I'm mostly working with people who are looking at that fairly snobby top tier. And I will conclude by talking a little bit about the concept of merit itself. Um, these are two authors who've written about the notion of merit, and I agree in a small way with both of them. I agree that no one should think they did anything entirely on their own. I agree that you should be conscious. You should be aware that if you grow up in a household that has two parents and they are employed and you are safe and you have good resources in your school, that you're lucky, and you can't take credit for that kind of good fortune, for that kind of luck. You might be mindful of the sacrifices your parents made. In my office, the lives of the parents I work with were very different when they were teenagers compared to the lives of their teenage children. But I also want you to consider one of these books, The Tyranny of Merit. First of all, consider that title. We're talking about merit scholarships, scholarships that reward working hard, getting good grades, and reward intelligence. The concept of this book, I have a copy of it here, is that merit is a form of tyranny. And again, I don't think that argument is entirely wrong, just mostly wrong. I'm going to read one sentence of a review by a journalist from the British newspaper, The Guardian. This reviewer says of this American philosopher who teaches at Oxford, he asks why exactly anyone should be rewarded for having the sheer luck to be intelligent or able to work hard. I would certainly acknowledge that intelligence has a component of luck. It's highly heritable, and in one sense, we get what we get. But I also know people who squander profound gifts of intelligence and others who make the most of what they have. And if we're going to dismiss hard work, the ability to work hard, as sheer luck, I'm not sure what that does to some of the most important values that animate the immigrant families that are largely the families that I know. You should be aware that merit scholarships are out there, and they are among the most generous forms of financial aid you can get from any institution. And they bump up against an ideological trend in universities to assume that because someone worked hard and is intelligent, they are just lucky. I mean, I want you to imagine a job review where you find out you're not getting a raise and you say, oh, is Amanda getting a raise? Oh, we can't talk about that. Is she getting a raise just because she works hard and she's really smart? Yeah, probably. That's probably why she's getting a raise. I want you to consider when the UCs eliminated the SAT and ACT from consideration, they did so against the advice of their own study, against the advice of their own faculty. And they did so, I would say, expressing this skepticism about merit. And so I just want you to consider the acceptance rates for these San Diego high schools are profoundly different. Almost 400 students with strong grades and scores were rejected by UC San Diego in 2023. There are many kids who have tough lives, and I've helped students in San Diego build programs at King Chavez to provide opportunities. King Chavez, though, has a 40% absentee rate and a 57% acceptance rate to UC San Diego. I'm open to have people disagree with me, but the UCs have quietly reinvented their admissions with this sort of ideological notion animating it. There are many universities and colleges that are in the top tier that will offer scholarships for students who work hard and are intelligent. the UCs have a different view of things. I am not the only person who sees this. Caitlin Flanagan is a writer in The Atlantic, and she's pointed out ad nauseum that this trend affects many, many Californians, especially Californians who in the last 120 years have almost every couple of decades been a target of racial animus. I'm talking, of course, about Asian Americans in California. I will briefly remind people to earn merit scholarships, you need strong test scores. We are very strong in test prep. Huffington Post says we may be the best. We also offer tutoring, which is customizable. This has been a much more popular option this year than it was before COVID. And we also offer long-standing 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th grade counseling to help you understand how you can build a resume that shows impact. We also work with students going into 12th grade, looking at the pieces that they have and helping them understand how they can have impact and also insight. I'm going to encourage you to use the chat function to send questions my way. I'll do my best to answer them. I'll read them and try to give everyone a sense of what questions, if any, people have. And I also will do my best to answer questions by email. I want to thank everyone for your time and your patience. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I have a little better view of things. I'm going to do SAT scores also help qualify students for USC scholarships? It's the PSAT that is the most important factor for triggering a presidential or trustee. USC is pretty opaque about what role actual SAT and ACT scores play. I mean, I'm tempted to say yes. Let's just say it's impossible to have a great PSAT score and a terrible SAT or ACT score. It just doesn't happen. It is common, though, to have a weak PSAT score because the PSAT that matters is administered in October of 11th grade. So if you follow the most common advice, it's to study the SAT, ACT in the end of 11th. That means you've missed the window for the PSAT, which is triggering so many forms of merit aid. In my office, I want students to study the SAT and ACT in the summer between 10th and 11th so that in the fall of 11th, they can kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone, including the PSAT. SAT scores are almost certainly a factor in getting admitted to USC. I think the PSAT score is the most important factor in awards of merit aid. The recording will be available. I'll make sure if you contact the office that you can have access to this recording. 11th grade is not too late to enroll for counseling for college applications. I have met students sometimes for the first time ever in May or June going into their senior year and discovered that there was an incredible project just bubbling away in the student's mind. And the student I'm thinking of, it took the mom and I together to get the student to realize, use the summer before 12th, the summer going into senior year, to take action with this amazing idea. The student ended up at Stanford and is now a Rhodes Scholar. Not too late. I would say getting into UC San Diego from CCA, someone says, is hard and not a valid option. No, it's a valid option. It's definitely an option. I would just point out, is being so amazing that you get into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT. Is that good enough to get you into UC San Diego lately? No, because I have students who got into all of those schools and not only didn't get into UC San Diego, didn't get into Irvine, didn't get into Santa Barbara, didn't get into Berkeley, didn't get into UCLA, didn't get into San Jose State. I have a student who's at MIT studying computer science. You have to be amazing. You have to show true impact and insight to accomplish that. Riverside told her no for her first choice major, computer science, and UC San Diego told her no for her first and second choice major. They told her no. That doesn't mean that you won't get into UC San Diego. I have students who are certainly less impressive than that who do get in, but I would want you to know the UCs, UC San Diego used to publish a sort of histogram like this showing you based on transparent factors what your likelihood was of getting in. 2018, this is the last year they published this. It's been completely opaque, very secretive ever since. And that's, I would argue, part of the problem. I want to make sure I didn't misspeak. Someone says, you said that these external merit scholarships, RISE, et cetera, they offer to Ivy Plus. Does that include Johns Hopkins? What I mean is the kind of person who could earn one of these external merit scholarships is already the kind of person who probably has a good chance of getting into Ivies. And I think Johns Hopkins is as good as any Ivy League school. And in some areas, biomedical engineering, it's considerably better. I'm not so sure that Johns Hopkins is where I would say you should go for undergrad if your dream is to go to medical school. I will tell you, a dean of admission at Johns Hopkins told me the last thing you should say in your essays to us for undergrad admission to Johns Hopkins is that you long to be a doctor and that is why you want to come to Johns Hopkins. But do the things that apply to Ivy League schools apply to Johns Hopkins? Yes. In fact, Johns Hopkins was originally invited to be part of the Ivy League and said no. It's maybe worth considering. The Ivy League technically is a group of 8 schools that play football against each other. It happens to also be a pretty strong indication of academic rigor and merit. But the original meaning is a group of schools who play sports with one another. The Duke Robertson Scholarship, this is also, I'm not sure that there's much difference. Someone asked if we help with internships. I do not have prefabricated internships and you write me a big check and then there's a kind of fake internship. I help students understand how thousands of students I've worked with over the last 20 years, I help them understand how they got internships. I will point them in the right direction. I will edit a cold email that I help you understand has to be sent to maybe 30 possible mentors or research PIs. I help you understand how to word it and who you should send that to. So in that sense, yes, we help with internships. I did make many references to CCA. I don't really think Torrey Pines is less preferred. I would simply say the students who are winning these outside extraordinarily prestigious merit scholarships in the last 7-8 years, they tend to come from CCA. Do I see extraordinary students at Torrey Pines? Yes, I do. I saw more of them before CCA existed. CCA kind of took some of those students. Tips on getting into Duke from SDA. I assume that's San Diego Academy. That's probably more longer one-on-one conversation. It'd be great if you were good at lacrosse. That would help. It would be great if your parents and grandparents went to Duke, you'd want to look into early decision. That would be a little bit helpful. And you'd want to look at Duke's supplementary essays. Look at them carefully. I've actually mentioned them in one or two webinars. Yes, someone is saying UC San Diego was rough this year for all San Diego Unified or San Diego. I don't know which that stands for. Probably San Diego. Yes, it was rough. Someone's asking about investment type of assets and need-based aid. I'm probably not going to address that in a webinar. I think I'd be a bit out of my depth. I strongly recommend that you consider there are ethical ways and unethical ways of improving your EFC, your expected, lowering your expected financial contribution, ways of looking like you have less money to give. The ethical ways are ways that require you to think a couple years ahead. And it's helpful if you have more control over how you're compensated. If you own your business, you can often delay compensation and put money that would have been money you pay yourself to live on. If you don't need that in the present as much as some others, you can put that into retirement vehicles. You could pay down your house and make your income shrink. That's perfectly acceptable. As I kind of suggested, you wouldn't want to park money in a friend's account, making you look poor. That is illegal. Someone is asking if Del Norte High School is preferred by UCs because of their academic rigor. Well, the statistics and the evidence, frankly, is no. Del Norte had an 11% acceptance rate to UC San Diego last year, and some other high schools that are not as rigorous had higher than a 50% acceptance rate. Del Norte is a very good school. It's an extraordinary school. It is very rigorous. I want you to consider the traditional notions of merit, working hard, being intelligent. At the highest level, the UCs have shifted the importance of that. I would say Del Norte is impressive to almost every set of universities other than the UCs. Will students get in from Del Norte? Yeah. Do the students who I think deserve to get in from Del Norte get in? Not in the last couple of years, since the UCs have changed their policy. If you apply to early decision, if you apply through early decision to a school, someone says, will we not get merit scholarships? That's an excellent question. Applying early decision should have no impact on a need-based evaluation for a private school or any school, but it may have an effect on merit scholarships. It also may not, but certainly merit scholarships sometimes get more generous as colleges see that you probably have multiple acceptances. If you apply and are accepted early decision, that's a binding form of application. You do not have multiple offers, multiple choices. If you do, you broke the early decision waiver. All right, someone's asking a question that's probably beyond the scope of this conversation. For Stanford, any tips to get in from Westview? They're saying, do you do many small things? You need to have extraordinary impact and extraordinary insight. And my one tip for Stanford would be look carefully at Stanford's supplementary essays. I have requested my students who get into Stanford, and last year we had 8 or 9. This year we still had quite a few who got into Stanford. I I asked them if they'd be willing to submit a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request so they can see what Stanford's admissions people said about their app. Based on years of doing that, my students' responses to the supplementary essays for Stanford seem to be some of the most important factors. So I would say, make sure you understand when you look at Stanford's question about curiosity, make sure you understand what they're really asking. Make sure you see 3 or 4 examples of someone who got in, because there's no simple formula for getting into Stanford. Are some local high schools preferred by Ivy Plus schools? Boy, that's tough. That could get me in trouble. Probably a little bit, yeah. But again, it's hard to sort out. I mean, some of the schools that you might say are preferred because they get lots of acceptances, if you look at the students who are accepted, they're unbelievably strong, profound in their impact. If a student who's profound in their impact is not at a school where we see traditionally a lot of acceptances to Ivy Leagues, do they have a good chance? Yeah, they do. I've seen students from high schools that have almost no track record of Ivy Plus schools doing well. They're looking at you as an individual. I don't see a lot of evidence that colleges look badly at community college courses. And I've never heard an Ivy Plus school say that. I've almost seen the opposite, that it can actually be kind of impressive, especially if you went to a community college class because what you wanted wasn't available at your school. We definitely offer essay consultation. Someone is asking that question. That is one of the core services that we offer. In 2020, 25% of the students who got into Harvard in the counties of Southern California were our students. That is one reason why we offer essay consultation for people in other continents as well as other cities. This is an interesting spilling the tea kind of question. Someone says, I think Westview got blacklisted from Stanford because of a guy who committed, then decommitted several times and got in trouble. Does a blacklist exist? I am certain if we asked Stanford, they would say no. And I would probably acknowledge, I don't think they have a blacklist. But if you are asking, is the track record of students they have accepted, does that influence what may happen in future years? Yes. Is that entirely fair? Probably not. But students who do unethical things, students who fail out of a school will make admissions think twice about what's happening at that school, especially people who break an early decision waiver. There is no early decision waiver at Stanford. And so I want to be cautious here. A lot of the rumors that spread, especially at Westview, about what one student did, a lot of them are just that, rumors, not true. Someone is asking about Duke and their supplemental essays. What I would want you to notice is Duke's supplemental essays ask almost entirely about your identity. What group are you in? Stanford used to have no essays that asked anything like that. It was all about you as an individual. And now Stanford has one essay that's about you and your group or ethnic identity, but lots of questions about, what do you think about? Can you tell us something amazing? Duke currently has no supplementary essays like that. They are all essays designed to think about issues of under or over representation. Someone says, where can we find examples of acceptance essays? Assuming you mean, essays that got people in. I have hundreds and hundreds of them. I am working on putting them in a book, but that is a long process. And I will show people essays as long as I have some limited permissions from students. Most of my students don't want me sharing them digitally, so I don't. But I will let people take a look at them as long as they don't take pictures and as long as they don't get spread around the world. And some students ask me, please don't share my essays. They're very personal. And in those circumstances, I won't share them with anybody. This one's asking, should you postpone committing to a college until the deadline? I don't think it has a strong relationship to merit scholarships. These are almost always going to be triggered in the ordinary admissions process. But if you are asking, will some forms of merit aid get more generous as you get near the deadline? This year, the answer is yes. This year, the answer is yes. Again, someone's asking if I can show examples of supplementary essays. In a one-on-one meeting, I'll show with certain permissions examples of these essays. Someone is asking, I hear some students are moving to easier high schools that are not as rigorous. Do colleges see it as a negative? I don't know what the honest answer is to that. I would say if you're at a high school that's so rigorous that you have lots of B's, even though you work hard, and if you worked any harder, you wouldn't get any sleep, I would say it might have been better to be at a less rigorous high school. And I do see some kids who they have all A's and their chances, especially to the UCs, are going to be better. I also know, though, that at a rigorous high school, you're around a different peer group. And in some sense, there's a rising tide that lifts all boats. Certainly, some schools are very rigorous, and the top students seem to benefit from the esprit de corps that develops. I think some students find the competitiveness of that environment to be less helpful. There are some schools that would be so lacking in rigor that some Ivy Plus schools might be a little cautious. And I would say that's where test scores and testing comes in. I have had students get into Harvard who told me the last time anyone from their high school got into Harvard was in the 1950s. And so this is not a rigorous high school. And the student absolutely was certain that it was a strong test score with strong impact and a weaker school. They knew that the work in the school wasn't really showing them what they needed. It was other factors. Again, there's a division here where there are many colleges who will weight a little more heavily traditional notions of merit, testing, grades, impact, and other schools, the UCs, they're less interested in how you impacted the world and more how have you been impacted, what tragedies and hardships have been visited upon you. They don't want to know anything about your strengths on a standardized test. They really would like to see a really strong unweighted GPA. And that's probably the most significant change in the last couple of years. That almost entirely explains the massive shift. Westview had a 44% acceptance rate to Berkeley in 2016. By 2021, the acceptance rate was 6.7%. Okay, someone says for Stanford supplemental essays, what I'm getting is they want to see your intellectual vitality. They used to use exactly that phrase in the question that now uses the word curiosity, but it used to use exactly the phrase that this questioner is offering. How do we go about approaching those? I will tell you exactly what a Stanford admissions officer told me 15 years ago. It still rings true. The Stanford admissions person I spoke to said, imagine in this question that you're giving a TED talk in 250 words. Imagine when we ask about intellectual vitality that you're giving a little mini TED talk. Think about what a TED talk does. It doesn't tell us something obvious. It tells us something a little bit counterintuitive. And ideally, the person telling us this has some personal connection. So a psychologist will tell us something about a social trend or some way of behaving that they're uniquely qualified to talk about. I'm very proud of my students' curiosity essays, which used to be intellectual vitality essays. And that is the essay that the Freedom of Information Act access to Stanford apps. That's the essay that I most see impressed Stanford admissions readers. I love helping students write that essay because it's a long process. We work on it over weeks because I pitch them ideas and see if they have the intellectual curiosity and vitality to run with it. I don't want to name him because it would embarrass him, but someone who got into Stanford early, I pitched him a pretty, what I thought interesting idea that I've had in my head since I was 26 teaching at UCLA. And this kid is so brilliant. He took it, wrote almost a perfect draft of it on his own. And I bet you next year, if he does the Freedom of Information Act request, we'll see that that was an important piece of his acceptance. People forget, editors, and I used to be a professional editor, we don't give people big words. We're not fixing grammar. Those are copy editors. Real editors, in my real work as an editor, my job was to sell the magazine. My job as an editor is to sell your student. Now, I got to have something to work with. But I don't write people's essays. I edit them. But editing isn't fixing grammar. Editing is what idea, what concept, what insight is going to do the job. And honestly, working on those elements makes my job very rewarding to see students who are truly intellectually engaged. I want to thank everyone for your time. We've been very gone over a little bit. Please reach out to us if there's any way that we can be useful to you, any way that we can provide assistance. Thank you so much for your time and your patience. And I wish everyone a productive and pleasant and safe summer. Thank you.